Welcome back to the podcast where fashion meets engineering. The podcast where we break down clothing using the same principles engineers use to design aircraft, race cars, spacecraft, and advanced materials. Today, we're talking about one of the most recognizable design signatures in modern luxury fashion, the Balenciaga ballooning silhouette. You know exactly what I'm talking about. The gigantic hoodies, the oversized parkas, the coats that appear 2 sizes too large, the trousers that seem inflated, the shoulders that extend beyond the human frame. To many people, it looks ridiculous. To others, it's genius. But beneath the memes and social media debates lies a fascinating engineering story. Why do designers intentionally create garments that appear too large? Why do luxury brands repeatedly return to ballooning silhouettes? What happens to the visual physics of the human body when clothing expands beyond its natural dimensions? And how did a design language created decades ago become one of the most defining aesthetics of modern fashion? Today, we're going to explore the engineering, geometry, aerodynamics, psychology, and visual perception behind one of fashion's most controversial house codes. Part 1. What is a house code? Before discussing ballooning silhouettes, we need to understand something called a house code. In engineering terms, think of a house code as a company's design DNA. Every major manufacturer has one. For example, a Boeing aircraft has recognizable proportions. A Porsche has recognizable proportions. A Rolex has recognizable proportions. Even without seeing the logo, experienced observers can often identify the product. Fashion works the same way. A house code is a collection of recurring design principles that appear across decades. This might include specific shapes, construction methods, proportions, materials, silhouettes. The Spanish fashion house founded by Cristobal Balenciaga became famous for redefining silhouette. Rather than decorating the body, he often reshaped it. This distinction is important. Traditional tailoring follows the body. Balenciaga frequently altered the body's perceived geometry. From an engineering perspective, that's the difference between designing around a structure and redefining the structure itself. Part 2. The geometry of the human body. Let's imagine the human body as a three-dimensional object. Most clothing follows relatively predictable geometry. The shoulders establish width, the waist narrows, the hips widen slightly, the legs taper. Designers have spent centuries emphasizing these relationships. Ballooning garments do the opposite. Instead of revealing geometry, they obscure it. Instead of showing dimensions, they create uncertainty. Engineers call this changing the object's envelope. An envelope is the outer boundary that defines the perceived size of an object. Aircraft have envelopes, cars have envelopes, buildings have envelopes. Clothing creates a human envelope. When Balenciaga expands a coat outward by several inches, the body inside remains unchanged. But the visual envelope changes schematically. Your brain begins processing a completely different shape. Suddenly, the wearer occupies more visual volume. Not because they are larger, because the garment is. Part 3. The ballooning effect. So what creates the ballooning effect? The answer lies in volume distribution. Most garments distribute fabric close to the body. Ballooning garments intentionally create space between the body and fabric. Think of a hot air balloon. The structure isn't defined by what's inside, it's defined by the volume surrounding the inside. Fashion designers create a similar effect using additional fabric, strategic seam placement, internal structure, pattern engineering. The garment expands outward. The result is a floating silhouette. Instead of appearing attached to the body, the clothing seems suspended around it. This creates visual tension. Our brains expect clothing to follow anatomy. Ballooning silhouettes violate the expectation. Anything that violates expectations tends to attract attention. This is one reason oversized luxury fashion photographs so well. It creates a stronger visual signal. Part 4. The aerodynamic paradox. As aerospace enthusiasts, we have to discuss aerodynamics. Loose clothing is generally terrible aerodynamically. Cyclists wear skin-tight suits, speed skaters wear skin-tight suits, race car drivers wear fitted garments. Why? Because reducing drag improves efficiency. Yet fashion often values visual impact over aerodynamic efficiency. In fact, ballooning silhouettes intentionally increase visual drag, not actual drag, visual drag. They slow the viewer's eye. Your brain spends more time processing the shape because it doesn't conform to expected proportions. This creates crescents. In engineering terms, the garment becomes a larger visual object without increasing the wearer's physical size. It's almost like adding a giant bearing around a small structure. Part 5. Why oversized looks expensive. Here's where things become fascinating. Many people subconsciously associate oversized garments with luxury. Why? Because excess itself communicates abundance. Historically, fabric was expensive. Using more materials signaled wealth. Large sleeves, large skirts, large coats, large trains. Across history, volume often correlated with status. The engineering challenge is controlling that volume. Anybody can add fabric. Creating controlled volume is much harder. Too little structure and the garment collapses. Too much structure and it becomes stiff. Luxury construction often exists in the narrow zone where volume appears effortless. That's difficult engineering. Part 6. The psychology of power. Ballooning silhouettes also manipulate perceived scale. Humans instinctively associate size with power. Larger animals often dominate smaller ones, larger objects command more attention. Architecture uses this principle. Fashion uses it too. A broader shoulder line creates authority. A larger silhouette creates presence. Even when the wearer is physically small, this is essentially visual engineering. Designers are changing how observers perceive dimensions. The physical body remains constant. The perceived body changes dramatically. Part 7. Why people love it or hate it. Engineering solutions are often judged by performance. Fashion is judged by reaction. And ballooning silhouettes create strong reactions. Some viewers see innovation, others see absurdity, but that's partly the point. If everyone agrees on a design, it's usually not pushing boundaries. The ballooning house code remains influential because it fundamentally changes how people perceive clothing. It forces a conversation about what clothing is supposed to do. Should garments reveal the body, or should they create entirely new shapes? Conclusion. The next time you see an oversized Balenciaga coat, don't just think about fashion. Think about engineering, think about geometry, think about volume, think about perception. Because what looks like a giant hoodie is actually a carefully engineered manipulation of space, scale, and visual physics. The body hasn't changed, the silhouette has. And sometimes changing the silhouette is enough to change everything. Thank you for listening to the podcast where engineering meets fashion. If you enjoyed today's episode, follow the show and share it with someone who thinks oversized fashion is just a trend. Because behind every unusual garment is a design problem waiting to be solved. And we'll see you next time on Era Couture.